Good evening. Thank you for the wonderful welcome. Thank you to the Hammermans for their support of Valley Beth Midrash, for the support of Ort Sion, and for being my drivers. Every time I come to this city, they have driven me home so many times. It's been custom now, but thank you for all your kindness. Thank you to Rabbi Shmuley. Where did he go? He's hard to miss. All right, well, there he is. There he is. Wherever Rabbi Shmuley is, thank you to Shmuley for all of his remarkable work, and welcome. Good to see you all. It's Rosh Chodesh. Tonight's the beginning of Nisan, which means you have 14 more shopping days until Passover. And the price of matzah and brisket starts going up now, so be very, very careful. And that's our topic tonight. I was born Erev Pesach, and Pesach has always been my favorite holiday. And I learned all the laws of Passover when I was in seminary. But the person who taught me most about Passover in its deepest meaning was my Uncle Henry. Uncle Henry was raised in a village in Poland, one of the first villages to be overrun by the Nazis. And when Uncle Henry was 15 years old, the Nazis gathered all the Jews of that town, which is about half the population of the town, into the town square. And as people entered the town square, there were two lines. Henry was moved to one side of the square, one line. His mom and dad, his parents, his four sisters, his uncles, aunts, and grandparents were all moved to the other line. He didn't want to lose his family, so he moved over to the other line, but his father realized what each line meant. And his father did something very cruel. He smacked his son across the face and shoved him across the square. Henry went to slave labor and spent 6 years as a slave for the Nazis. His family were taken out to a ravine outside of the town and killed. He never saw anyone in the family again. Uncle Henry was 16 years old. He was a big, strong kid. He was trained as a carpenter, and so the Nazis could use him. And he was taken to 7 different concentration camps until he ended up at Auschwitz. He was one of the men who built the barracks at Auschwitz, built them as a carpenter, and then spent the next few years slaving for the Nazis. As the Russian army came across and was threatening the Auschwitz concentration camp, the Nazis gathered the remaining Jewish inmates of Auschwitz and marched them through the Polish winter from Poland into Germany. In his group, 3,500 men began, and only 700 arrived in Germany. He was taken to an out camp of the Bergen-Belsen concentration camp, where he was liberated by the American army in 1945. He spent some months in a DP camp and then came to America, where he met and married my aunt and became part of our family. We knew that Uncle Henry was a survivor. We knew because he had numbers tattooed on his arm. We knew because he had some strange personal affectations. When he slept, you thought he was dead. He slept so peacefully and soundly. When he moved into a home in suburban New Jersey, the first thing he did was take down all of the fences around the house. And we said, Henry, someone's going to come and steal your barbecue. He said, let them have it. I can't look out at the window and see fences anymore. He had these strange affectations, and we knew he was a survivor. But no matter how many times we asked him to tell us the story, he wouldn't talk about it, ever. He never spoke about it. Until my aunt schlepped him to a lecture at their synagogue with Elie Wiesel. And Elie Wiesel came to speak about, the Holocaust, as he often does. And Henry, my uncle, had been at Auschwitz when Wiesel was there. Wiesel came only in the last year of the war because he was taken from Szeged in Hungary. Uncle Henry was there from the beginning of Auschwitz. And after the lecture, Uncle Henry wanted to meet Elie Wiesel. So they waited in a long line as people got their books signed. And finally, at the end of the line, my uncle met Elie Wiesel, and they began to talk. And my aunt told us later that they were talking in Yiddish, then talking in Polish, then talking in Russian, then talking in Yiddish again. And they were talking about people. Did you know this one? Did you meet this one? What happened to that one? And they stood in an empty synagogue for about an hour talking. And my aunt told us that at the end of that conversation, Elie Wiesel turned to my uncle and said, "Have you told your children?" And Uncle Henry sheepishly said, "No, I haven't told them." And Elie Wiesel grabbed him by the collar, by the throat, and said, "You must tell them. You must tell them, because if you don't tell them, they will never fully believe that it happened. They will not understand what it means." And Elie Wiesel convinced him, and he sheepishly agreed. And shortly after that was Passover, and I was a student in the seminary. My aunt and uncle lived in New Jersey. We came for dinner one night during Passover. And after supper, when the dishes were put away, we're eating macaroons and tea. Uncle Henry said, "I have to tell you something." And we sat. My aunt and my uncle, my cousins, my wife and me. We sat for 3 hours, and he told us the whole story. And when he finished, he was exhausted. And we said, "Henry, why have you never told us this story?" And he looked at us and he said, "How could you understand? You grew up in America. You know freedom. You've never been hungry a day in your life. You've never been cold. You've never been abandoned. You've never been frightened like we were. I was afraid you wouldn't understand and you wouldn't believe." And then we said, "Well, then why are you telling us now?" He said, because Wiesel is right. You've got to know. And you've got to hear it from me." And he said, "And I'm telling you, I didn't tell you all of it. I just told you the parts you need to know. There's more, much more horrible things that I wouldn't tell you. You need to know. Because now you need to know how to live in the world from what I had to go through." A remarkable story. And it's from that moment that I understood Passover. Because I can understand a generation of refugees from Egypt who had the exact same experience that my uncle did, who spoke with a funny Egyptian accent, had stripes of whip marks on their backs, had strange personal affectations, and had this reticence to tell their children, because how could their children born into freedom ever understand the horror of being a slave? But feeling at the same time this compulsion to share the story, because the story is so important to who we are and how we see the world. Because the story changes us. The story changed Uncle Henry. He retired from his work, and when he retired from his work, he started telling his story. He would tell it to everybody. He wouldn't stop telling it. He went into inner city schools and stood in front of kids, not Jewish kids, but kids from every background. And he told them his story. And he said, "You have a responsibility to build a world of life because I built the kingdom of death. And you must respond with an affirmation of life." It made him an activist. It made him committed. It gave him purpose in the world. And I understand that is the exact same motivation that gave us Passover. It gave us Passover. But I also understand the reticence, because how do you tell the story? How do you share such a story? And what might this story do to those who hear it? How do you give the story in such a way that it lifts and doesn't destroy, that it brings hope and not despair, that it brings possibilities and not dead ends? The story of Passover that you and I know comes from the Bible. It took place 3,000 years ago. The story of Passover is told in the first chapters of the book of Exodus, but the Passover that we celebrate comes from the Mishnah, from the Talmud of the 2nd century. You find it here at the top of my page, the back of this page. You find it, it's in Mishnah Psachim, the Mishnah of Passover, the 10th chapter. And this particular line is the entire soul of the holiday. B'chol dor vador chayav adam lirot et atzmo ke'ilu yatzav Mitzrayim. In every generation, every one of us must tell the story as if we personally were taken from Egypt. Now consider that for just a minute. There are lots of holidays that remember important moments, lots of holidays that commemorate important events. But what's being told here is something far more radical. You're not simply to remember, you're not simply to commemorate, you're not simply to tell, you are to appropriate historical experience as if it were personal memory. Personal memory. This can't just be history. This must be memory so that you can testify. So that you can testify to your children. Because of what happened to me, what God did for me when I came out of Egypt. Now let's ask 3 questions about that. 4 questions next week, but 3 questions tonight. Number 1, how on earth do you do such a thing? And number 2, why? Why this memory? And why is this so important? And number 3, how does this change us? How does it change our outlook on the world? How does it change the world that we choose to live in? Let's begin with the how. How do you take historical experience and turn it into personal memory? You reenact it. You put on a play. That's what the Seder is. It's a big play. The table is the stage. The food is the prop. We become the players, and the Haggadah is the script. And you're going to put on a play. You're going to put on a play. And what's the play about? Well, what is the Seder? The Seder is our last night in Egypt. And we are to appropriate the emotions, the feelings of that last night in Egypt. We were slaves. Our parents were slaves. Our grandparents were slaves. Their parents were slaves. And up until yesterday, we had no hope except to be slaves, and our children would be slaves, and their children would be slaves. And all of a sudden, out of nowhere, came this fellow Moses, who looked like us, but didn't talk like us, because he was free. And he said, pack your things, we're leaving. Now, a slave can't think that way, because a slave cannot think outside of the bonds of slavery. That's what slavery is. The worst slavery is not the slavery of the body. The worst slavery is when the slave internalizes his own condition as slave and can't imagine anything else. So when Moses comes and says, I have come to liberate you from slavery, most of us said, we're not slaves. We're not slaves. We just do this. And Moses said, open your eyes and feel it. Of course you're slaves. And most of us didn't go with him. Most of us didn't believe. Most of us couldn't break out of our self-definition as slaves. Only a few of us were ready to leave Egypt that night. And we packed our things and got ready to go. I had a friend who had a Seder when I lived in New York City. He had a wonderful idea. He said, wear your traveling clothes, bring your passport, and come to our Seder, bring a suitcase, and put in the suitcase what you're going to take from Egypt. And we got to his apartment, and I realized to my horror that he'd gotten away. He took away all the chairs. We were going to sit on our suitcases for the entire Seder. My wife was smart. She had a soft one. I had a Samsonite, Vase, mirror. And during the course of the night, we each opened up our suitcase and brought out what we were going to bring. One woman had candlesticks that her mother had brought from Europe. And one person had photographs from their childhood. And someone had books that they cherished. And we all shared this object that we were going to carry with us to the promised land. That's the ethos of that night. The sense of that night is, what was it like to be a slave on the last night of slavery? Our anticipation, our excitement, the exhilaration that tomorrow it would all be different, our fear. The fear of letting go of what you know for something you have no idea what's ahead of you. The fear of letting go of patterns that bring security. No matter how bad they are, they have security, because you know the one virtue of slavery is that it's secure, because every tomorrow is exactly like every yesterday. And to step out of that pattern into a world of freedom and uncertainty is terrifying. And what would happen? And how did we know we'd even make it through the night? After all, we were the crazy ones who put the blood on our door because we believed that the angel of death would cross over us. But how do you know that the Nazi police weren't waiting to see who put blood on the doors? My uncle told us about the last night in the camp. He was in the out camp of the Bergen-Belsen concentration camp. He was in a barracks. The Nazis had lights out, put the men in the barracks, and then nailed shut the door of the barracks. The men of his barracks wouldn't go to sleep because they were convinced that at any moment the Nazis were simply going to burn down the building or machine gun them all to death in order to remove all the witnesses to what they had done. And all night they stayed up waiting for death to arrive. And all night they heard machinery coming and going and shots fired and explosions all around them. And then the sun came up in the morning, he told us. The sun came up in the morning and they were miraculously still alive, and they heard these heavy boot steps coming up the ramp to the barracks. And then someone with the butt of a rifle smashed down the door of the barracks, and the men of his barracks threw themselves on their knees and screamed out Shema Yisrael because they were convinced this was it. And suddenly there was a tall man standing in the sunlight, speaking to them in Yiddish, in an Oklahoma accent. He was a sergeant of the United States Army sent to liberate this camp. And he asked them in Yiddish, "Are you alive? Are you men?" And they stood up and they kissed him and they hugged him. And that's how it ended for him. And the new journey began. And that's what the Seder is. And that's why when you do a Seder, wherever you are, for whomever you're doing it, put down the Haggadah and tell them the story. And do it in any language they need to hear it. When my kids were small, we used sock puppets, right? Let my people go. No. However you got to do it, tell the story. Because the purpose of the entire exercise is to gather in the experience and to feel what that night was like. And then to feel what it was like to run out of Egypt and to run across the desert and to arrive at the banks of the Red Sea and to stand there and for a moment to dream that maybe we could be free. And then to hear Pharaoh's chariots coming from behind us and to turn to Moses and say, "What now?" And to watch Moses say, "Just watch." And surely if you haven't read the book, you have seen the movie. And he held his arm over the sea, and the sea opened up, and we crossed to the other side. It doesn't matter how miraculous that is. The miracle wasn't that the sea opened. The miracle was that we all followed him in, that we all said yes to a tomorrow that was so uncertain, yes to freedom, yes to new possibilities. And we crossed to the other side, and the sea came back, and suddenly we realized that no one was chasing us. And at that moment, the people Israel discovered the greatest truths of our faith, that there is a God with purposes in our history, and that history bears possibility. At that moment, hope was born. And if you take nothing else from this tonight, listen carefully. Hope is what we are about. Hope. We invented hope. We invented hope because we told the world that time is never simply a circle. Time is a line. It's a journey. Hope that there's possibilities built into the human experience. And no matter how bad yesterday was, tomorrow might be just 1 degree better. Hope is what we are. There is no such thing as a hopeless Jew. That's an oxymoron. That's a contradiction. The person who steps up and tells you what is what must inevitably be, has checked themselves out of the Jewish people. Because we stood on the other side of the Red Sea with mud on our boots and the wind in our hair. And we stood there and we looked out at the vast expanse of the wilderness, and we knew that there are and always will be possibilities in history. And that's the most important lesson of the whole exercise. Why do we tell this story? Why this story? Why this memory? Of all memories, 3,800 years of Jewish history. Why is this one the one we tell? Well, when I have a question like that, I can call Rabbi Green and ask him. But damn, he was busy when I needed the answer. So the other place to call if I can't get hold of Rabbi Green is I ask my computer. I have a very wise computer. And my computer has all these Jewish books on it. So I asked it a very simple question. Show me all the verses in the Torah where I am instructed to do something because I was a slave in the land of Egypt. And wouldn't you know it, the computer read out a whole bunch of verses. And I started to read these. And I realized why we tell this story with such passion. I gave it to you. That's what this sheet is. And I called this sheet the Haggadah's Secret Missing Page. And the reason I call it the Haggadah's Secret Missing Page is because it's not in your Haggadah. It's in my Haggadah. And maybe in 2 weeks it'll be in your Haggadah. But until then, it's the Haggadah's Secret Missing Page. And the reason why it's missing is because, of course, our ancestors came to Shul every Shabbos. And they heard these verses. So they knew this by heart. But you and I are at Costco on Saturday morning. So we don't hear all these verses. So because you're at Costco, I gave you all the verses. They're right here. You ready? Let's take a look together at a couple of these, shall we? Look at the first one. Exodus 22:20. That's Mishpatim. That's the laws after the Ten Commandments are given. You will not wrong a stranger or oppress him, for you were strangers in the land of Egypt. You will not ill-treat any widow or orphan. Basic ethics. Stranger, widow, orphan. What do they have in common? This is the audience participation time of our game. What are they? What? Powerlessness. Good. Vulnerability. Loneliness. Good. Stranger, widow, orphan. If they're cheated, if they are oppressed, they don't have the ability to redress that grievance. The stranger doesn't have standing in a court. In a patriarchal society, a widow doesn't have standing in a court. And in adult society, an orphan doesn't have standing in a court. If someone oppresses them, someone cheats them, there's nothing they can do about it. There's nothing they can do about it. So what does the Torah tell you? Don't cheat them. Now, wait a minute. Why? I mean, that's basic ethics. Why would you cheat the vulnerable? Why would you cheat the helpless? Because you can get away with it. So why shouldn't you do it? Well, you could say, because it's the right thing to do. And you have now arrived at what we call Platonic ethics. Great Plato, the great Greek philosopher, said, if you know the good, you will do the good. That's a lovely idea. But if that's true, why does Coca-Cola sell so much stuff? Because I know Coca-Cola is not good for me, and yet I can't put it down, right? Then you have Immanuel Kant in the 18th century who said, it's your duty to do the good. Great. It's your duty to do a lot of things and you don't do it. I know some Jews who drive faster than the speed limit on the freeway. What's the Torah's answer to the question of why you shouldn't do this? Do not oppress the stranger because you were the stranger. What do you call that? That's an ethic of empathy. That's an ethic of, you know the stranger, because when you see the stranger, the widow, and the orphan, you identify them with right away. I knew him. I am him. His experience is still part of mine. An ethic of empathy requires you to have internalized that experience. That's why you have to feel like you came out of Egypt. That's why you're going to eat maror in 2 weeks. Literally internalize the bitterness of being a slave. Literally. Now, I'm the rabbi of a very, very enormous synagogue in Southern California. Our synagogue's so big, we have our own fire department, right? And yet, a person comes to see me some years ago, member of my shul, with her maid. Almost everybody in Southern California has a Spanish-speaking maid. So this woman comes in with, I don't know, Maria. And I speak cleaning lady Spanish, so I can talk to her. And she says, Senor Rabino, I have a problem. I have a cousin. Her name is Maria. Her name is Rosa. Rosa came from Salvador 8 weeks ago. And she came in and she's working for a family, a Jewish family. And for 8 weeks, she's been asking the family for her pay. And for 8 weeks, they put her off and haven't paid her. She needs the money to send to her children in Salvador. That's why she came to America to work. And then this woman, a cleaning lady, a maid, a housekeeper, she looks at me and she says, Señor Rabino, Hebreos don't do this. Hebreos tienen corazón. Jews have heart. I know Jews. She said, I've been working for Jewish families for 20 years. Jewish families don't do this. And suddenly I'm embarrassed. I'm the rabbi of this enormous synagogue, and this cleaning lady has just embarrassed me as a Jew. I said, momento. I pick up the phone. The guy wasn't a member of my shul, thank God, right? But you know, when your name is rabbi, you can get past a lot of secretaries really fast. And I got to him, and I said, yo, I understand that someone working in your household hasn't been paid. You can take care of that for me, right? She got paid. She moved to a different family. Hebreos tienen corazón. She knew. This is who we are. We don't do this to people. You don't take advantage of people who can't fight back, who can't redress a grievance. Why? Because that's who we were. Because that's what we were. All right, that's one. Let's take a look at another one. You ready? Let's look at the second one. You ready? We have about 2 more hours, right? You good? All right, good. Just make sure you got time. I don't want you to lose any of this. When you see your enemy's mule lying under its burden and would refrain from raising it, you must nevertheless raise it with him. You'll not subvert the rights of the needy in your disputes. You'll not oppress a stranger. You know the soul is stranger, having yourselves been strangers in the land of Egypt. All right, this is a different one. This is a different kind of reading of this. All right, this is a story that won't happen in Scottsdale or Chandler or Tempe. A farmer loads up his animal with produce on the way to market, and he overloads the animal falls down. You have to lift the animal up. How do you do that? You get everybody together in the neighborhood, and we all lift together. Only this guy is your enemy. And the question is, do you have to help him? And the Torah says, now, all right, but let's give a better example, because that doesn't happen in Scottsdale. What does happen in Scottsdale? Across from you is a house that's used by Airbnb as a party house. This is my neighborhood. A rapper with an R, not a W, rents a house behind my house, and they have very loud parties till late at night, playing, teeth chattering, loud music till late at night. So it's midnight, and I have a grandson trying to get to sleep, and the music keeps waking him up. So I pick up the phone, you pick up the phone, and you call the guy, and you say, yo, your taste in music is fine, but could you just lower it a little bit? My kids are trying to get to sleep. And the gentleman says something unkind about your mother. So you figure perhaps he doesn't understand the gravity of said situation. So you go around the block and you knock on the door, and the fella comes to the door, and you explain to him that you're welcome to play the music and have his parties, but it's midnight and you're trying to get to sleep. And could he please just lower the music? And he says something unkind about your grandmother. Now, a week later, it's pouring rain. Rain is something we have in California, but you don't have it here. But it's pouring rain. And you come around the corner, and there is that very same neighbor with a flat tire and no handle for his jack. What are you tempted to do? Come on, fess up. What are you tempted to do? What do you want to do? At the very least, drive away. If you're a little bit more nefarious, hit a puddle and splash him. Maybe roll down the window and show him your manicure, Maybe roll down the window and turn your radio up real loud, Maybe break into his house and steal his stereo. You all thought of those things, right? And probably worse, right? Right? What does the Torah say you have to do? Why? Because he's in trouble, and you know what it's like to be in trouble. That's true. That's because you were a stranger in the land of Egypt. You know what it's like to be in trouble. Yes, and maybe you can make a neighbor into a friend, an enemy into a friend. Who knows? But there's one more reason. What do you call the part of yourself that just fantasized about all those horrible things you could do to him? What do you call the part of us that has fantasies of vengeance and getting equal. What do you call that part of us? Human. Someone said human, right? Yeah, but it's not just human. It's sort of the darker side of human, right? In the Talmud, you call it Yetzer Hara. And the question is, are you a slave to that part of you? Are you a slave to those impulses? Or can you rise above those impulses? You ever had those experiences where there was somebody who deserved to get it, and you said to yourself, I want to be the bigger person here, and I'm not going to get back at them? You ever have that? Anyone here have a sister-in-law? Would you like mine? You know? Come on. We all have those things. But you have to say, I got to be the bigger person. I got to be the bigger person. Okay, let's take another one. We'll take two more, and then we're going to call it a night. Only 2 more hours. Ready? Go down to Deuteronomy 5. This is the 10 commandments in the book of Deuteronomy, right? 4th commandment. Observe the Sabbath day to keep it holy, as the Lord your God has commanded you. 6 days you'll labor, do your work. The 7th day is Shabbos of the Lord your God. You'll not do any work. You, your son or daughter, your male or female slave, your ox, your ass, any of your cattle, or the stranger in your settlement, so that your male and female slave may rest as you do. Remember that you were a slave in the land of Egypt. The Lord God freed you from there with a mighty hand and an outstretched arm. Therefore, the Lord your God commanded you to observe the Sabbath day. You all knew that, right? Okay, Shabbos comes. 6 days you do your work. 6 days we employ people. 6 days we work our animals. We work our farms. Comes the 7th day. What do? Loud. We rest. Who rests? Everyone. You rest. Your spouse rests. Your kids rest. Your servants, slaves, or workers rest. Even your animals rest, so that no one has to work the animal. Now think about that. What does that mean? On that day, everybody rests. So 6 days you can say, Maria, I'm watching a football game. Could you make me a sandwich and bring me a beer? And Maria will say, Si, senor. On the 7th day, if you say to Maria, get me a sandwich and a beer, what does she have a right to say to you? Get your own goddamn sandwich, right? She doesn't work for you on the 7th day, which means what? On the 7th day, everybody becomes equal and free. Or to put it in fancier language, the social hierarchy collapses. No one is an under and no one is an over. No one is a boss and no one is a worker, an employee. No one is above and no one is below. No one is rich and no one is poor. Everyone is equal on that day. Once a week, we practice utopia. Once a week, we return to the Garden of Eden, where everyone cooperates with everyone else. Once a week, there are no social roles that determine hierarchies. Which means what? It means that you're not going to allow anyone to internalize their role in the social hierarchy as if it were their only identity. Or to put it in another language, no one can claim that your place in the hierarchy is metaphysically determined. It just happens to be an economic arrangement that Bill Gates has more money than Andy Green. But on Shabbos, he becomes the king. He becomes the king because it's his Shabbos. In other words, you don't want anyone thinking, I am an employee, I am a slave, I am a servant, I am a lower, and they are higher, and that's the way God intended it. No, that's an economic construct. But on the 7th day, God intends all of us to be equal. This is a remarkable social revolution. It's a remarkable social revolution, especially in a society that is as hierarchical and stratified as ours. All right, one more. This one's the most radical one of all. Ready? Hold on. And I didn't write this. This is in the Torah. So don't go home and say a bunch of Democrats came to the shul. This is in the Torah, okay? You shall, look at the, not the next, the 24:17. You will not subvert the rights of the stranger or the fatherless. We had that before. You will not take a widow's garment and pawn. That's the tiny little detail you might skip over, right? Your eye might, there's a little detail, because the rest of it's going to go on because you were a slave in the land of Egypt. But stop for a minute. You will not take a widow's garment and pawn. Tell me the story. Tell me that story. There's a whole narrative in those words. Once upon a time, she was a wealthy woman married to a wealthy guy. They lived in a big, beautiful home with art on the walls and fancy furnishings. She wore gowns and jewels and had all the comforts of a wealthy family. The kids went to fancy schools. They drove expensive cars. They took mighty, beautiful vacations. And then he died. And he left behind a debt, a medical debt, a business debt, a criminal conviction, a criminal judgment, a civil judgment, and the money disappears. And she has to feed her children. So the first thing she's going to do is sell the jewels and sell the gowns and trade the cars for something more modest and sell the art and sell the furnishings. And eventually she'll sell the house and move to something more modest and take the kids out of the expensive schools and put them in the public schools. And when she runs out of things to sell and still needs to feed her children, what is the last thing she sells? Herself. Think about that. You take a widow's garment in pawn, which means you strip her naked. She sells herself because she must feed her children, and this is what she knows she can do. And what does Torah say? Because you were a slave in Egypt, and you knew what it was like to be reduced to a nothing, to be socially invisible, to have no clout, no voice, no place, no visibility in the society, you are not permitted to allow any human being to fall to that level of indignity, of dehumanization. You are not permitted to allow a human being to fall to that level, that she must sell her dignity as a woman in order to feed her children. That is a Jewish commandment. Now, how you do that, we can debate. Whether you do that by means of a welfare state, whether you do that by means of private charity, whether you do that by means of other instruments of society and culture, that's your choice. You find a way that works. But you must know that this is a principle of our faith. Why? Because you know what it's like to be her, to be stripped of all dignity, to be stripped of all humanity, to be stripped of all presence in the world, to be seen through instead of being seen, to be voiceless. You know what that's like. You carry that memory with you because you were a slave in the land of Egypt. Now the Torah is going to take a go at how might we do this. This is an experiment in social engineering. How might we do this? Ready? When you reap the harvest of your field and overlook a sheaf of the field, do not turn back and get it. It shall go to the stranger, the fatherless, and the widow, so that God may bless you. When you beat down the fruit of your olive trees, don't go over again. It goes to the father, the stranger, and the fatherless, and the widow. You gather the grapes of your vineyard. Do not pick it over again. It goes to the stranger, the fatherless, and the widow. Always remember that you were a slave in the land of Egypt. Therefore do I enjoin you to observe this command. All right, first let's get the din. Let's get the law. So let's just understand the law. You're a farmer. You have a field. You have an orchard. You have a vineyard. Got that? It's harvest time. What are you permitted to take? Somebody tell me. What are you permitted to take? What? First picking. Or to use the phrase, one pass over the field. Right? One pass through. That's what you're permitted to take. Wait. What about the stuff that wasn't ripe on that day? What about the stuff you couldn't reach on that day? What about the stuff that falls off the truck on that day? What about that stuff? You leave it. You can't touch it. This is not charity. This is property law. It doesn't belong to you. It belongs to the stranger, the fatherless, and the widow. It doesn't belong to you. You have, according to the Gemara, you have to leave the field so they can come and not have you watching them. And they don't have a sense of gratitude to you because this is what they're entitled to. It's not that you're being a nice guy. This is what they're entitled to. This is a project in social engineering, but this has three very important implications. All right, implication number one. You ready? Are we good? Implication number one. Ready? Anyone here ever done farm work? Anyone ever done? I lived on a kibbutz for some summers in Israel. Wasn't permanent, but I was on the kibbutz. Let me tell you something. It's romantic and beautiful and organic for 10 minutes. The first 10 minutes, I felt at one with the earth. And then for the next 5 hours and 50 minutes, which is my 6-hour shift, my back hurt, my knees hurt, my ankles hurt, my everything hurt. It's boring, it's grueling, it's miserable, and it's tough. What does the Torah say? You must allow the poor to come and harvest their own food. You can't just give it to. What if the farmer comes to us and says, I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I used to live in Texas, so pardon me for this, okay? I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to go over my field 4 or 5 times with my John Deere 6520, which is the finest piece of farm machinery ever created by human hands, built right here in America out of Chinese parts. I'm going to go over my field, and I will take out all the grain from my field, all the grapes from my vineyard, all the olives from my orchard, and I will write you a check. And you can do whatever you want to help the poor. Do we have a deal? I'll write you double. What do you mean, no? I'm giving you double, darling. That's not nothing now. Come on now. All right, you drive a hard bargain, but I see you're a good person. I'll give you triple. What's the difference? What's the difference between a welfare office and this law? Talk to me. That's true. One is commanded and the other is mine. But what is the difference in truth between the way the Torah wants you to do it and the way we do it in welfare society? Why? Talk to me. Why? Because they have to work for it. And if you have to work for it, there's a certain dignity in it, no matter how hard it is. And when you were a slave in the land of Egypt, what did you learn? That the worst part of slavery is not the physical task. It's not the physical oppression of slavery. It's the degradation of the soul. It's how you turn a human being broken, how you break a human being by stealing all of the dignity of being a human being. You know what it's like to be in the indignified position of having to beg for something. And so when you create a welfare system, do not subject the poor to that indignity. That's what you learned in Egypt. That's what you learned in Egypt. Protect the soul. You can feed a person's belly and destroy their soul. And the Torah says, don't do that. You knew better. You know better from having had this experience in Egypt. That's implication number one. Here's implication number two. Now we're going to talk to our farmer here, right? And the farmer is going to read this. He's going to say, what? He's going to say, what? Now, let me get this straight. I cleared that field. I plowed that field. I planted that field. I irrigated that field. I fertilized that field. I cultivated that field. I watched that field. And now my crop comes up and you tell me I'm entitled to what? To just one going over it? And people that did not work my field are going to come and take the stuff that are you some kind of communist? My God, a bunch of Jew communists. I knew it. I just knew it. And he's not wrong, by the way. Right? It's my field. It was my field. It's my daddy's field. It was his daddy's field. It's been in my family for generations. It's my field. How can you come and tell me what to do with it? Is it his field? Is it his field? What do you mean, no? Is it his field? If it were his field, he could do whatever he wants with it. But if you could tell him what he's allowed to take from it, then it's not his field. Whose field is it? It's God's. God owns all the property. We just lease. We just lease. We just lease it. And leasing comes with strings attached. And here's one of the conditions, the limitations. Now, why would the Torah tell that to you? The Torah would tell you that for a very simple reason. And by the way, there's a very powerful example of this. The Torah is worried about ownership, this concept of ownership. And the most radical expression of this is, you don't own your own body. Did you know that? You don't own your own body. You only rent. That's why you must live in a town where there's medical care. You're not permitted to take any action that destroys the health and well-being of your body. And that's the reason for the prohibition on tattooing in Jewish law. You can still get buried in a Jewish cemetery, but you're not. The reason you're not allowed to tattoo is like renting a car from Hertz, painting it purple and bringing it back. They frown on that. Trust me, right? And the reason you can't destroy the body is because that's like renting a car from Avis and buying the collision damage waiver and just mailing them back the keys. They really frown on that, right? Because it's not yours. It doesn't belong to you. You're supposed to bring it back to that office by the airport, right? Now, here's the point. Why is the Torah so worried about ownership? Very simple. Consider the concept. So the farmer says, that's my field. And right next to it, that's my house. That's my house and my field. And right next to that is my beast. That's my beast, my house, my field. We got that down now? Everyone understand that? My field, my house, my beast. What's the next one? That's my wife. And in so many cultures, marital law was expressed in terms of ownership. The Hebrew word for husband is Baal, which means owner, right? Ownership. That's my woman. I'll do with her as I want. And my house, and my field, and my beast. And then next to that's my kids. They're my kids. I'll do what I want with them. You don't tell me what I'm going to do with them. They're my kids. And then right next to that, that's my man. And there you go. Back to slavery again. The Torah is worried that if we can own anything, we want to own everything. And so it went exactly the opposite. It said, you don't own anything. You just borrow. You're just negotiating leases here when you buy and sell stuff. Because this idea that I can own a human being is only another step beyond owning a field and owning a house and owning a beast. And the Torah is worried about that. All right, one more implication. Right? You guys okay? You ready? One more implication. You ready? Anyone ever been to the Midwest? Anyone seen wheat fields, corn fields in the Midwest? How big are they? How big? Like you drive across Nebraska, it's the most boring place on earth, right? It's beautiful, it's lovely, it's wonderful. It's Kansas, Arkansas. I was in Texas, I can tell you that. It's miles of corn. It's miles of wheat, right? And the farmer goes over his field and he silos all this wheat and all this corn. And he puts all the grapes in his larder and all the olives in his barn. And he goes to sleep. And in the middle of the night, he wakes up in a cold sweat because there's one stalk of wheat still standing in the field. And it mocks him. Nah, you miss me. I'm still here. And he can't sleep because he left one. He left behind one stalk of wheat in a 10-mile field. And it mocks him and it mocks him. What do you call that guy? Crazy. Yeah, but come on. What do you call that guy? I asked this in an audience. Someone said, Elon Musk. You know, he's obsessed. He's compulsive. He's greedy. The Torah has a better idea for this. He's a slave. He's a slave. A slave isn't a person who doesn't own anything. A slave is a person whose stuff owns him. He can't live because his stuff owns him. And so it's wonderful to have ambitions and aspirations. They drive us and they make us work harder and do great things in the world. It's wonderful to have that. But every now and again, You have to stop and sit and look around you and say, look what I have. And look how wonderful it is. And then say the words that will make you free. I have enough. I have enough. I have enough. Tonight, I don't have to worry about grasping, about getting. It's about shifting your perspective from an ethic of scarcity to an ethic of abundance. To be able to say, I have enough and I can share what I have. How do you say I have enough in Hebrew? Dayenu. Dayenu. The song Dayenu. You all know this song, right? Dayenu, 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 Dayenu is a declaration of freedom. I refuse to be owned by my stuff. I refuse to be owned by a sense of scarcity that I have to grasp and hold on. I can open my hand. What's the first thing you do in the Seder? As soon as you light candles and make Kiddush, what do you say? Kol dichfin yete v'yesev. Anyone who's hungry, come, we got plenty. And imagine there were Jews over the generations that had very little, and they still said, Kol dichfin yete v'yesev. Because to open up the door and to open up your heart and to open up your hand and to open up your home and say, come and eat with us is your freedom. We have plenty. Yes, this year we're here. Next year we'll be in the promised land. But today we still have plenty. We can relax and enjoy the gifts of God's bounty and give thanks to God and live in a spirit of gratitude instead of a spirit of grasping. And that makes us holy. Why are we bidden to make this story personal memory? Because this is the story that makes us who we are. This is the story that gives us hope. This is the story that gives us our social ethics. This is the story that gives us our personal ethics. This is the story that gives us our ability to walk the world and know that we have a mission in the world. My uncle, when he started telling his story, it changed the man. It truly changed the man. In a certain way, it healed this horrible, horrible wound that he had lived with his whole life. Because when he could stand in front of kids, black kids and white kids, poor kids and rich kids, and say to them, you have an obligation to build the kingdom of life because I built the kingdom of death. You must undo what they made me do. It gave him a sense of mission in the world. And it gave him a sense of purpose. And when he died a very, very happy man with numbers tattooed to his arm and a story that was his legacy. This is the tattoo on our arm, and this is our legacy. And I hope it brings all of you a great deal of happiness next week. Take care.
Thank you so much. That was marvelous. That was incredible. I'm going to take the privilege of the first question, and then I'll walk around if y'all have questions for max 25 minutes. So, can the Seder actually achieve the aspiration of what you're laying out? Meaning, the Sedarim I've been to, and my friends who go to Sedarim, they're thinking about koshering their home. They're thinking about preparing the food. They're thinking about the alienation from the person at the table they feel alienated from or polarized from. They're thinking about sounding smart when they make a comment. They're thinking about if not being embarrassed when they sing the song. They're thinking about the nostalgia of their grandparents, right? There's all these things that are going on, but moral transformation at the Seder? Like, what would that even look like? And is it possible? And have you seen it? And or is it really this where it's happened? Before Pesach, we can think about it. But can the Seder do this?
You think of all the things that his family thinks about. Yeah, one screwed up. Oh my God. Funny you should ask that, Rabbi. But on the other side of the page are my top 10 tips for a better Seder. I don't know if a Seder can have moral transformation. I have seen people transformed by the experience. Like Rabbi Green, one of the great joyful things I get to do as a rabbi is to welcome new Jews, welcome people from outside our faith into our faith. And we always ask them at the Beit Din, with the court that gathers to convert them, what made you want to be Jewish? And you'd be surprised how many people said, I sat there at the Passover Seder, and it was a wonder to me. And we'd say, like, why? What was it that was a wonder to you? First of all, that the youngest child in the family asks questions. That you teach your children to ask questions of your faith. And that people at the table ask questions of faith. In my faith, the faith I was raised in, they would say, we were never allowed to ask questions. And not only are you allowed to ask questions, you require it of your kids. And the fact that you have these discussions at the table. So and then the second thing they'll say is that you sing, and there's such joy, and that faith is about joy. And the third thing they'll say is that you eat. Because you Jews know how to eat, like, I mean, they'll tell us these stories and you say like, oh, I'm so proud, right? It's one of the nice things, by the way, is to have guests at your Seder table who aren't Jewish, because they will notice all the things the rest of us take for granted, and they will point them out to you, and they will say, oh, that's wonderful that you do that. That's so, it's just wonderful. So my 10 tips for a better Seder. I don't know if you can have moral transformation, but I think you can make it better, okay? So number one, I lead a Seder for a huge, really diverse, crazy family, my wife's family, and my family. And my brother-in-law would always subvert the Seder. He would give me a hard time. And then once you should never get mad, but I got mad. And I realized what he was yelling about. And so I went into the kitchen and I got a kitchen timer. You ever got like with a dial? And I said, Ricky, this rings, we eat. I said it for 1 hour. This rings, we eat. And I put it down in front of him. He became a pussycat. People who don't know the Seder, the thing that drives them crazy is the indefiniteness of it. So if you tell them the Seder is going to last 42 minutes, 45 minutes, an hour, whatever it's going to be, as long as they know that when it dings, they eat, they become much happier. I know this sounds silly. And so what you do is you set a time limit, and then when you're 10 minutes before that time, you stop whatever you're doing and move to the dayenu and the brachot, and you make bracha over matzah, and then you eat. Right? That sounds easy, right? It works. Number two, make karpas salad. Anyone eat parsley at their Seder table? Why? Who told you to eat parsley? Denny's eats parsley. Don't eat parsley. You're better than that. The purpose of karpas is to kill the hunger of people at the table. So make a big tray. Here's a Jewish word, crudité. Carrots, peppers, olives, what else? Jicama, artichoke hearts. And then anyone use salt water for your karpas? Why? The tears of the slave. Nonsense. It's the cheapest salad dressing we could afford. Bring on guacamole. That's now a Jewish word. Guacamole, guacamolta, guacamole. Make guacamole. Get nice salad dressings of all kinds. Get ranch dressing. You can get kosher for Passover ranch dressing. Tell me the Mashiach's not close. I mean, come on. Put nice and then things that people can dip in and munch on during the Seder. For Jews to want to learn, they have to eat. You guys I'm proud of you. You've been here an hour now. You have nothing to eat. You're thinking about dessert. I'll be done in a minute. Number three, number eight, actually. Rabbi Green is a graduate of the Ziegler Rabbinical School. I taught him, right? Rabbi Yanklevich was a graduate of Hovevei Torah. I'm a graduate of the Jewish Theological Seminary of America. You have three rabbis here. That's a lot of Jews. We will testify, all three of us, nowhere in the corpus of the Jewish faith are you commanded to drink Manischewitz Concord grape wine. Nowhere, 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 nowhere. The only reason we drank that stuff was when we first moved to this country, we were dirt poor, and we lived in New York, and the only grapes that grow in New York are Concord grapes, and Concord grapes are awful unless you dump a lot of sugar in there, and that's where this came from. You can do better. drink Cabernet Sauvignon, drink Sauvignon Blanc, drink Chardonnay. If you're kosher, there's lots of great kosher wines. I have a kosher wine guy, and my kosher wine guy sends me a whole case. I have wines from Australia and wines from California, from Israel, from France, from Italy, and it makes for a much better Seder. It really does. Trust me on this. Invite questions. At our Seder, our rule is that during the Magid, during the telling of the story, you can ask any question you want. And my brother will always ask a wonderful question, and we'll stop and we'll talk about his question. Because it's a time for questions and a time for answers and a time for moral conversation. And the things we've talked about tonight. You can use this, by the way. Or take the first 2 chapters of the book of Exodus from the Bible and just learn that. Or, if you're having young people come to your Seder, divide up the Seder and ask each of them to bring something. A piece of literature, a poem, a song lyric, an image that bespeaks the questions of slavery and freedom, oppression and liberation, of justice in the world. You ask kids to bring stuff about justice, you're going to get wonderful stuff and make for great conversations. And that's the purpose of the Seder. Great moral conversations about these issues. Okay, sing songs. Got to sing all the songs. We sing a Dayenu verse for everybody at the table. Ilu natan lanu et Rabbi Green, natan lanu Rabbi Green, Dayenu. You go around to everyone, the oldest to the youngest, or the youngest to the oldest. That's fun. We do Chad Gadya with animal sounds. Do you do that? Chad Gadya, Chad Gadya. There you go. There's Abin Abavid, Then when you get to the Kalba, it's who let the dogs out. And yeah. My congressman came to my Seder one year. He's my congressman. And he wanted to play the angel of death, And he sort of looks the part, So we got to the Atam Malcha Mavis. He stood up and said, I have a subpoena for you. It was great. It was great. Use a good Haggadah. If you're still using Maxwell House, you're better than Maxwell House. Come on. There are thousands of Haggadahs out there. If you go online, you can download lots of Haggadahs and make your own Haggadah. If you're desperate for one, my synagogue is called VBS. VBS, very big shul.org. You can go to VBS.org, put in Haggadah in the search bar, and take my Haggadah. I wrote one. I took Rabbi Schulweiss, my blessed teacher, all of his commentary on the Haggadah, and I wrote it into a Haggadah. It's the most accessible Haggadah because it's 45 minutes from beginning to end, because I get hungry. And it's a great Haggadah, has this in it, right? And I'm very proud, by the way, because one year I get a call from a guy, and he says, I am the chaplain's assistant in the United States 7th Fleet, and we are going to have a Seder on the deck of an aircraft carrier, 1,200 people, and I wonder if I can use your Haggadah. And I said 2 things, one smart and one not smart. I said, of course you can. I'd be honored to use it. Can I ask you where you are? He said, yes, but the CIA will be at your door in an hour if I tell you. So I'm very proud that the United States Navy has adopted my Haggadah. If it's good enough for the Navy, it's good enough for you. Enjoy it. Make the second night different. Get to the second half, right? The second half has all the hopeful stuff in it and good songs. But this is the most important thing. The most important thing is what the rabbi pointed out. You're going to spend all this time cleaning and cooking and inviting and setting the table. Take a few minutes and ask yourself, what would I like this experience to be? And prepare for it. Ask people to bring stuff, to bring material. Let them bring poetry and music, and let them bring images and readings, and let them bring discussion questions. If nothing else, ask everybody to bring a good question. What question would we want to discuss tonight at the Seder? But bring this stuff so that you can make the Seder a truly memorable experience.
Very nice. That's a real gift to give us those tools. Thank you so much.
It's all here. All right, I'll answer any other question you have.
Rabbi, I have a question.
Yes, please.
A number of years ago, we read, I think in the Shulchan Aruch, that you should only serve white wine during Pesach.
Really?
Because drinking red wine gave people ammunition for the blood libel.
Oh, God.
That we were drinking the blood of Christian children.
Yeah.
And using it to make our matzahs. For years, we used only white wine, and then we decided to heck with that, and they can think whatever they want about us, and so we then serve both. Is there any rationale for that prescription, which I believe is in the Shulchan Aruch somewhere?
Yeah, it was probably written by Rabbi Caro's wife, because you have this beautiful tablecloth, and at the end of a Seder, it has all these red stains on it. So I'll give either use white wine or invest in spray and wash. No, I don't know that particular teaching, and we use every color wine at the Seder. And red wine, there's Kabbalistic reasons for using red wine because it's about God's might and God's power. I will tell you, however, just as one quick commentary, you all know who Tucker Carlson is? Well, you'd be very proud to know that as a gift to the Jewish community, Erev Pesach, Tucker Carlson has revived the blood libel. Because when asked why it is that an otherwise isolationist president took us on the adventure of the war, he blamed it on Chabad. He said it's a Chabad conspiracy. Chabad influenced the president to go to war in Iran. I have friends in Chabad. I never thought of them as a conspiratorial, but the idea, I mean, and the sad thing is that there are people that are repeating this now, not just Chabad, but that this is a Jewish war and not a war for the defense of American democracy. And that's a very scary thing. So while the white wine rule I wouldn't worry about, the blood libel I would. The blood libel I would.
Thank you.
Hi.
One of the points that Dr. Bob Pryor, non-Jewish Egyptologist from Long Island University, points out in his lectures is that there are a number of stories in Exodus that are very consistent with ancient Egypt history. And he concludes that we Jews actually were in Egypt because of that. My question to you is, does that matter?
That's a wonderful question. I would like to think that it has historical legs, but I can't prove it. Unfortunately, the videotape got erased, right? So we don't have the tape. And even if we had the tape, I'm being facetious, of course, but even if we had historical records, we tell the story in such a way that no videotape could capture it. We tell the story that it's not that a bunch of runaway slaves escaped from Pharaoh's police and slipped through the swamps to get out of Egypt. We tell the story that God brought us out of Egypt, or that we believe in a God who has purposes in our history, and that this moment taught us that history bears possibilities, that history is an open system, it's not closed and not determined, and that freedom has the power to overcome oppression, and right has a power to overcome might. And all of those lessons are not going to be proven or disproven by the historicity of the event. They're proven because that's our faith. That's our faith. So even if we did have absolute empirical proof that we were in Egypt and built all the pyramids, that's not the point of the story. The point of the story is what we learn from it and how it changes us and our vision of the world. Okay, so in my view, I can argue yes or no. I mean, there are some indications. Someone just published something this morning in Times of Israel from some things they just discovered, some writings they discovered. And there are some indications that there were Semitic tribes in Egypt that escaped and somehow made it back to. But the point of the story isn't the historicity of the story. The point of the story is what it makes of us as a people. Does that make some sense? And that's how I tell the story to my kids.
Brilliant and powerful. Thank you so much. Thank you, Ortzion. Thank you, Hammerman family. Thank you, Rabbi Ed Feinstein. Thank you all. Have a great Pesach and have